I'm Adam Booth and you're watching Sporting Icons.
So I was watching a interview with David Haye and Derek Chisora, and within that interview I started thinking about the career of David Haye, the rise and the fall of David Haye. Now, he was one of the guys that kind of like re-sparked my energy for loving boxing again, because I kind of like fell out of boxing for a little while. I was never really hyped up about quite a few of our fighters, to be honest with you. I recognised that they were good, and of course I'd always keep tabs on who's who and who's doing what, but not extensively. But David Haye, he was one of these guys that kind of really sparked my enthusiasm for boxing again, most notably when he unified the cruiserweight division. Okay, he was never undisputed, but him unifying, I was like, okay, this guy is the real deal. Okay, so he got destroyed by Carl Thompson back in the day, but the way that he bounced back was phenomenal. I mean, at the time, him even defeating, say, a Bonin or a Fragomeni, they were pretty good wins at the time. But then, of course, when he went on to Mormek and Macronelli, I was like, right, okay, this guy is seriously the real deal. Let's see how he does it at heavyweight. So, of course, him going through the gears and moving up, and even before he even had his heavyweight debut, I remember him chasing down Vladimir Klitschko. I don't remember, was it at a shopping mall or it was at an airport? I don't know where it was. But the way that he ran up on him and showed him zero respect of, I'm going to knock you out, you're just a robot, you ain't going to be able to compute. When I hit you, your whole cyborg brain is going to go, it can't compute. He was an excellent trash talker. He really brought me in to the hype of David Haye, of what it is that he could do. And from that moment, I was like, right, I really want to see this fight. Him versus Vladimir Klitschko. Vladimir Klitschko, who was blasting out everybody. Vladimir Klitschko, who just was unstoppable. But of course, we always knew that if you hit Klitschko on the chin, there's a very good chance you could go. David Haye could be the man. Even Tyson Fury was saying that David Haye convinced him that he was going to wipe the floor with Vladimir Klitschko, which of course we'll get onto in a second. But him taking on a Monty Barrett, that just was what it was. And then him going after Nikolai Valuev to become the WBA World Heavyweight Champion. Now, at that time, he was negotiating with Vitaly Klitschko. And that's a fight I really wanted to see, because out of the two Klitschko brothers, I knew that if David Haye was to land on Vladimir Klitschko, he could put him out. But other than that, he's going to get well and truly outboxed, because he's a much smaller guy. But when it comes to Vitaly, who's more upright, who's more solid, who will take a few shots on the chin, I thought David Haye may have more of a chance against Vitaly. And I'm sure there's quite a few of you right now screaming, saying how wrong I am on that one. And that's absolutely fine. But then when I think everything was pretty much negotiated and everything was okay that he was going to fight Vitaly Klitschko, I was like, okay, great. Let's see how good David Haye is at heavyweight. Then out of nowhere, he announced that he's fighting Valuev, this damn near 7-foot orc-looking guy. And I was like, right, okay. Is he going to beat him? Maybe he's a bit too big. And David Haye he beat him on points and nearly had him out of there in the last round, become world champion. I thought, okay then, great. We've now got a Brit who's a heavyweight champion. Again, a lot of people starting to get behind this one. At long last, since Lennox Lewis, we've got a heavyweight champion that maybe we can get behind. Because nobody really felt the need for Audley Harrison in that at that time. People were hoping Audley Harrison was going to do this, that and the other, but we always felt that he weren't good around the chin. But after he won the WBA world title, he took on John Ruiz. He defended that title against John Ruiz. And I'm like, okay, fine. Hopefully we get the Vladimir Klitschko fight next. Then he ends up coming out with a Audley Harrison. And I'm like, oh my God, really? And that fight stunk. Let's be honest, it was an awful fight. But I was still hyped up about David Haye. You know, David Haye wearing the T-shirt with the noggins of the Klitschko brothers, holding them up and whatever. I thought, this guy, he's really good at selling. You know, he can really give the trash talk. Nobody can out-talk David Haye. He's a damn hype machine. And he took on Audley Harrison in a bit of a stinker. But we kind of knew that he was going to get Audley Harrison out of there. It was more a case of when rather than if. But, of course, Eddie Hearn, that was talking about Audley Harrison's big left hand and blah. So, again, they sold it, and it was a bit of a stinker, to be honest with you. But then he finally signs up to fight Vladimir Klitschko. And, again, I was buying into the hype. the round the table, he's giving it to Vladimir Klitschko. He's telling him that you ain't going to be able to compute what I do to you. Your jab, jab, grab tactic ain't going to work with me. I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to make you look stupid. You're going to be looking down at the stars from the canvas. I'm going to knock you smooth out. And he really, really got under the skin of Vladimir Klitschko. And I think he's probably, I don't know whether he was the first person to really get under his skin, but outwardly you could see Klitschko weren't happy with everything that David Haye was going on, and he seemed emotionally invested, which was great for David Haye. But then, of course, the fight came around, and David Haye didn't do anything. I was like, okay. And then he pulls his toe out at the end. I'm like, oh, no. All this hype, all this belief, everything that I had in David Haye dispersed when he pulled his toe out. I mean, if he not pulled his toe out and have said, you know what, I wasn't feeling too good, or I just couldn't get near him, and maybe at some point we'll get a rematch and blah, 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 we might go, okay. But to pull out your toe, that really disappointed me. But then after Derek Chisora, he took on Vitaly Klitschko, which is a very good fight. I mean, Derek Chisora showed a lot of mustard in that fight. He really did. David Haye was starting to chastise Vitaly Klitschko at the press conference saying, I want you. Now, that was the fight that I always wanted, which is why I said that about Vitaly Klitschko, that maybe, potentially, David Haye may have beaten him. At the time, that's what I was thinking. Looking back, probably not, right? But at the time, I was thinking, okay, good. So David Haye, he's still got the confidence, he's still trash talking, blah, blah, blah. But then Derek Chisora, he stood up, them two had that scuffle in the crowd, and Adam Booth got cut and all this kind of stuff. And that fight, again, it was a very exciting build-up. They put the cage up, all this, that, and the other. It was a pretty good fight. David Haye knocks out Derek Chisora. In fact, he was the first person to knock out Derek Chisora, if I remember rightly. But after he defeats Derek Chisora, I thought, okay, maybe we're going to get the Vitaly Klitschko fight, because Vitaly Klitschko said, well, why don't you two have a fight? Because even Frank Warren's on the table. Why don't Chisora and Haye have the fight, and then the winner go fight Vitaly Klitschko? Vitaly and his manager at the time, Bert Monty, was like, yeah, let's do that. David Haye wins. I'm thinking, okay, great, he's going to fight Vitaly. Next thing you know, he's having a press conference with Manuel Char, who again had just went life and death with Vitaly Klitschko, and I felt that, okay, there was a pretty bad cut in that fight, but the referee potentially stopped it a little too early. It's arguable, but maybe looking back, he was right. But I thought, okay, this guy's pretty good. Let's see what David Haye's got then. He blasts out Manuel Char. We'll get that Vitaly Klitschko fight on. And for some reason, that fight just dispersed. I don't know what happened to it. I still don't know exactly what happened, other than David Haye pulled out. I think it through injury or something, probably. But rather than go back to the table with Manuel Char, he then announced he's going to be fighting Tyson Fury. And Tyson Fury absolutely outdone him in the press conference. He was prattling around, he was talking down to David Haye, and David Haye couldn't live with him. Verbally, couldn't live with him. So for me, when people talk about how maybe Tony Bellew was the one who ended David Haye, I think Tyson Fury kind of ended him, to be honest with you, verbally. From that moment, I didn't feel confident in David Haye. David Haye needed that edge. He needed that confidence. He needed to feel like he was getting the upper hand verbally, because he was an excellent trash talker. And when Tyson Fury absolutely mopped the floor with him, I was like, okay, this is not a good look. It's really not a good look for David Haye. Don't get me wrong, I was still favouring David Haye at that point. I ain't going to hide behind it. I was favouring David Haye. Looking back, I was probably way wrong on that one too. But all David Haye kept doing with Tyson Fury was, well, Tyson Fury, he's gangly, he's not even that good, he's uncoordinated, he even punches himself in the face, which is true. Tyson Fury did actually punch himself in the face in the boxing match by accident once. But it's all that kind of thing that was kind of funny, but he couldn't live verbally with Tyson Fury, and then ended up pulling out twice. The first time, after saying how Fury's never going to be able to touch him and blah, 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 he pulls out with a cut. And I remember thinking at the time, but if you're so confident that Fury isn't even going to land a punch on you, then why are you worried about a cut reopening? It's stupid. Either way, they rescheduled it, and then David Haye pulled out again with a shoulder injury, had 3 years off, and I've felt dejected by him. To be honest with you, I really did. And his comeback was nothing short of a calamity, cluster, F-U-C-K. Okay, it was absolutely awful. Absolutely awful. To come back against a YouTube fighter who learned how to fight by watching YouTube videos, Mark Demore, I was like, oh my God. And David Haye, for some reason, he looked like he was waterlogged. He just bulked up. I don't know what happened. Even though he became vegan, he bulked up. And his stance was weird. He looked all funny. He looked sluggish. I thought, this isn't the same David Haye. But of course, David Haye adopted his new favourite word that he even uses right now, planet. I'm still the biggest puncher on the planet. I'm still one of the fastest on the planet. And even now, he still uses everything on the planet. But I remember looking at him thinking, you're more too concerned about your physique than you are your boxing ability. And then when he's supposed to take on Shannon Briggs, when he had the opportunity to fight Shannon Briggs, he then pulls out an Arnold Jajai, who was a sparring partner for Tyson Fury once and a couple of others. He had a pretty good record. He was 29-0, but he weren't any good. I'm like, this is terrible. This is terrible. And then, of course, he promised Shannon Briggs that he was going to fight him after, if Shannon Briggs fought on his undercard. Shannon Briggs did that, and it just never materialised. David Haye bottled it, is what happened. He bottled it. He couldn't live with the fact that Shannon Briggs was running up on him. And I knew that his heart had gone at that point. But somehow, after a Mark Demori and Arnold Jajai fight, he became mandatory challenger for the WBO, which meant that he could take on the winner of Joseph Parker and Andy Ruiz Jr. at the time. Joseph Parker, he wins that fight. It should be Joseph Parker versus David Haye. David Haye was talking about how he's going to become a heavyweight world champion again. Well, this was his opportunity. And then throws that in the bin to go fight cruiserweight Tony Bellew. Clearly a money move. And we all know what happened. His Achilles heel went in the first fight. But one thing he did show in that fight was that he had a lot of heart. Let's be honest about it. He showed a lot of heart. And had his Achilles heel not gone, a lot of people were saying, well, maybe he would have beaten Tony Bellew at that point. We don't know. But in the rematch, Tony Bellew just battered him. Okay, David Haye started well for the first couple of rounds, but Tony Bellew just battered him. And we knew that that was the end of it. We ain't going to see the glory days of David Haye and this, that, and the other. I mean, for me, I think one of the biggest moments was when Tyson Fury belittled him verbally and the fact that he left Adam Booth. I think a combination of those two is what paved the end for David Haye. And David Haye, let's be honest, he was conning the public. He conned us with the Audley Harrison fight. That's what he done. He conned us. He conned us with the comeback. And Mark Demori and Arnold Jajai just really, really annoyed me. So anyway, I mean, that's my thoughts on David Haye. I mean, do I remember him for the last part of his career? Not really. I mean, his last part of his career, this David Haye 2.0, and the way they kept talking about himself as a third person as well, that's not what I really remember him for, the Tony Bellew fights or anything. I remember him in that whole era of chasing down the Klitschko brothers. So for me, I think David Haye had a fantastic career. He's earned a whole ton load of money, and he recaptured a lot of boxing hearts, such as myself. So for that, I have to respect David Haye, that is for sure. But anyway, that's my thoughts on David Haye. Of course, you drop me yours in the comment section below. Do you remember him for all the good things that he'd done in boxing, the fact that he was putting boxing back on the map? Or do you look at him as a con man? And I know a lot of you guys saw the writing on the wall probably way before I did, because I was emotionally invested in David Haye, because I really felt that he could be the answer for us here in the UK. It never really materialised in some ways. Of course, him becoming champion was great, but I'm sure a lot of you guys felt even before then that he weren't the real deal. I mean, I was still buying into the hype up until the last given bell, to be honest with you, with David Haye. But looking back, I do feel that he did con us quite a bit. And at the end of the day, if we're stupid enough to pay, we're stupid enough to pay, all right? That's kind of how it is. Anyway, you all drop your thoughts below about it. Of course, click a thumbs up to this video. Subscribe, and I'll catch you all on the next one.